She was forced to sleep among pigs, mocked and abandoned by everyone. But when fate called, Maluwa's life changed in the most unexpected way. How did this pig girl rise from the dirt to claim her throne? The truth will leave you speechless. In the sun-scorched village of Mudora, where the red dust danced in the air and the trees bent low under the heavy sky, a young girl named Maluwa lived a life that few could imagine. She was known for her sparkling eyes so bright they seemed to hold the promise of a better world. But no one could see the silent battles she fought every single day. Her life, once filled with laughter and warmth, had turned into a cruel shadow of what it used to be. When Maluwa was still very small, her mother, a woman loved and respected by all, passed away, leaving a hole in her heart that nothing could ever truly fill. Her father, broken by sorrow, tried to rebuild his life and remarried a woman named Bashira. Bashira arrived with sweet smiles and soft words, and even her daughter Inira seemed friendly at first. But all of that was nothing but a mask. The day Maluwa's father fell to a sudden merciless fever, everything Maluwa knew and loved collapsed around her. Bashira, no longer pretending to be kind, revealed her true heart, one of pure bitterness and jealousy. Inira, spoiled and cruel, quickly became her mother's partner in torment. Together, they made Maluwa's life a living nightmare. They stripped her of everything she once had, her cozy little room, her soft bed, her books, her small treasures. Nothing was spared. They cast her out like unwanted garbage, forcing her to live in the backyard, inside the dirty pig pen, with nothing but mud and waste all around her. Maluwa's days and nights were spent among the pigs. Her bed was the cold, slimy earth. Her blanket was a collection of ragged, torn cloth, barely enough to cover her trembling body at night. When it rained, she had no roof. When the sun burned, she had no shade. The pigs, messy and loud, were her only companions. Yet somehow, deep inside, Maluwa held onto a small ember of hope, a whisper of a dream that she was meant for something greater. Even when her hands grew cracked from scrubbing floors, even when she went to bed hungry while Bashira and Inira feasted, even when the villagers averted their eyes and pretended not to see her suffering, Maluwa kept the light in her heart alive. Little did anyone know, including Maluwa herself, that fate was already spinning something extraordinary in her favor, something that would one day lift her from the mud and set her among kings. Each morning, before even the first rooster's crow echoed across the village, Maluwa was jolted awake by the harsh screech of Bashira's voice, cutting through the misty dawn. "Maluwa! Get up, you lazy swine!" Bashira would yell, her words sharp like the sting of a whip. "You are no better than the pigs you sleep with." Without time to wipe the mud from her face or stretch her aching body, Maluwa would scramble to her feet. Her clothes, stiff with dried dirt, clung to her thin frame as she rushed to obey. Meanwhile, Inira, Bashira's precious daughter, lounged inside the house like a pampered queen, resting on cushions stuffed with soft cotton, sipping sweet milk and laughing at the sight of Maluwa slipping in the muck. Maluwa's mornings were filled with endless work. She would wade barefoot through the cold, sticky pig slop, her small feet sinking deep into the filth. Her hands, raw and bleeding from days of rough labor, worked tirelessly, cleaning the sty, feeding the pigs, hauling heavy buckets of water. The sharp smell of waste clung to her skin, and no matter how hard she scrubbed herself with the rough river sand, it never truly went away. Villagers would often pass by on their way to the market, pausing to point at her and whisper among themselves. Some even laughed out loud, calling her the pig girl of Mudora, as if she was some sideshow meant only for their entertainment. Their laughter cut deeper than any whip, but Maluwa refused to let them see her break. Instead, she held her head high, forcing a gentle smile onto her face, even when her heart crumbled inside her chest. She remembered her mother's songs, soft lullabies that spoke of courage, hope, and unseen miracle. As she worked, she would hum those tunes quietly to herself, closing her eyes and pretending she was not scrubbing a pigsty, but dusting the golden stairs of a grand palace. In her mind, she was not a poor orphan girl. She was a princess in disguise, patiently waiting for her true life to begin. Though the world around her was cruel and cold, Maluwa's spirit stayed warm. She didn't let bitterness take root in her heart. Every act of cruelty she faced, she answered with silent strength. Every harsh word hurled at her, she buried with a sweet memory of her mother's love. What Maluwa didn't realize was that while she was singing to the pigs, dreaming in the mud, and hiding her tears with smiles, Something far greater than she could ever imagine was watching her. Destiny, with all its mysterious power, was listening closely to every song she sang, and it was quietly making plans to lift her from the filth and place her where she truly belonged, among kings. One scorching afternoon, when the ground itself seemed to sizzle under the burning sun, the quiet village of Mudora was shaken awake by the thunder of hooves. A royal messenger, dressed in shimmering blue and gold, rode into the village atop a magnificent golden steed. His arrival caused a whirlwind of excitement as villagers dropped their baskets and rushed out from their huts to see what news he carried. Sitting tall and proud, the messenger unrolled a scroll tied with a red silk ribbon and, in a voice that carried across the dusty streets, announced a festival that would soon change lives forever. King Zuberi of the powerful neighboring Umara kingdom was hosting the grand festival of the rising sun, a celebration known throughout the lands for its splendor and mystery. But this year, it was even more special. At the festival, a new royal maiden would be chosen, a young woman who could rise from simple beginnings to serve in the palace, and if fortune favored her, maybe even become the future queen of Umara. The air seemed to buzz with magic at his words. Every young woman in the kingdom, no matter how poor or humble, was invited to attend. It was a chance, a dream, a spark of hope that could turn an ordinary life into something extraordinary. Mudora exploded with excitement. Girls who once had no reason to hope suddenly dreamed of crowns and silk gowns. Mothers pulled out treasured beads and shells, braiding their daughters' hair with trembling hands. Fathers who had little else to give offered whispered blessings and promises of prayer. Laughter and chatter filled the streets as plans for dresses and songs and journeys were made. Even Bashira, whose heart was as cold as stone, leapt into action, determined to make her daughter Inira the star of the festival. She brought out bolts of fine fabric she had hidden away and bathed Inira in scented oils so rare that the whole village could smell the sweet perfume drifting from their hut. Inira basked in the attention, twirling around in silks and flashing smug smiles at anyone who looked her way. Her pride grew bigger with each passing hour, and she truly believed that the crown was already hers. Meanwhile, Maluwa stood silently in the shadows, her heart pounding against her chest. She listened to the plans, watched the girls dance in their new dresses, and swallowed back the ache rising in her throat. When she finally gathered the courage to ask Bashira if she too could attend, Bashira's cruel laughter filled the air like a crack of thunder. "You," Bashira sneered, "attend the festival? You smell worse than the pigs you sleep with." The words hit Maluwa harder than any slap. No dress was sewn for her, no beads braided into her hair, no blessing whispered over her head, only silence and mockery. Yet even as she walked back to her muddy corner behind the house, her bare feet dragging through the dirt, Maluwa's heart refused to give up. In the secret corners of her soul, she dared to dream that somehow, against all odds, her life could change too. That night, while the whole village buzzed with excitement and celebration, Maluwa sat alone in the darkness of the pig pen. Above her, the sky stretched wide and heavy with stars, each one twinkling like a tiny hope far out of reach. The cool night air wrapped around her, carrying the soft grunts of her pig companions who snuggled close for warmth. In her small hands, Maluwa worked tirelessly, weaving together scraps of old rags she had secretly gathered. Her fingers were clumsy, trembling with cold and fear, but she stitched anyway, her heart pouring into every crooked line. She dreamed of a dress, not of silk or gold, but a dress that could at least cover her dignity and allow her to stand among the others at the festival. "If only Mama were here," she whispered, her voice breaking the stillness of the night. Her eyes filled with tears as she looked up at the stars, as if hoping her mother's spirit could hear her prayer. "She would find a way for me. She would not let me stay here like this." Her words floated upward, carried away by the night breeze. As she struggled to tie the last pieces together, her mind painted pictures of a life beyond the mud, beyond the cruelty, beyond the shame. But fate had other plans that night. Bashira and Inira, their laughter sharp and cruel, had been watching from the shadows. They crept toward her like jackals smelling weakness. With wicked grins stretching across their faces, they snatched the fragile rag dress from Maluwa's hands. Before she could even plead, they ripped it apart, tearing the poor thing to shreds and throwing the pieces into the mud. "You belong in the dirt, Maluwa," Inira sneered, her voice full of poison, and with a rough shove, They threw Maluwa into the filthy trough, where the pigs squealed in confusion. Covered in mud and pig slop, Maluwa sat stunned, her heart shattered into 1,000 tiny pieces. Bashira and Anira's mocking laughter rang in her ears long after they had gone back inside, slamming the door behind them. Alone, humiliated, and broken, Maluwa curled into herself beside the pigs. Tears poured down her cheeks, mixing with the grime that clung to her skin. She clutched the remaining shred of cloth to her chest and cried until sleep finally claimed her. But even as she slept in the filth, her spirit did not surrender. Deep in her dreams, Maluwa prayed, not just for herself, but for a miracle bigger than anything she could understand. She prayed to the stars, to her mother's memory, to the very earth she lay upon. And somewhere, far beyond what her eyes could see, something, or someone, was listening. As the night deepened and silence wrapped the village, something strange began to happen. A soft, shimmering light floated over the filthy pigsty where Maluwa lay sleeping. The pigs stirred, but did not grunt. They seemed calm, as if they too could feel something magical was near. From the thickest part of the shadows, an old woman stepped forward. Her cloak gleamed in rich colours of gold and deep purple, flowing around her like living mist. Her eyes, sharp and kind all at once, glowed under the starry sky. Maluwa stirred awake, blinking in confusion at the dazzling figure before her. Her heart thudded loudly in her chest. Was she dreaming? Was this another cruel trick? But the old woman's voice was gentle, like a warm hand resting on her wounded spirit. "Child," she whispered, her voice carrying the weight of 1,000 stories. "Why do you cry?" Maluwa sat up, wiping her tears quickly with the back of her muddy hand. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I dream of sitting among kings, but I live among pigs." She looked down in shame, afraid to meet the old woman's gaze. But the old woman smiled, a deep, knowing smile. "Only those who stay pure in the mud," she said, her voice ringing like a bell in the cool night air, "can shine brightest among jewels." Her words wrapped around Maluwa like a soft cloak, filling her chest with a warmth she had almost forgotten existed. Without another word, the old woman reached out her gnarled hand and touched Maluwa lightly on the forehead. In an instant, a magic unlike anything Maluwa had ever known rushed through her. Her filthy, torn rags melted away, replaced by a breathtaking gown that seemed to be woven from golden threads and pieces of starlight. The cloth shimmered in the dark like a river of dreams. Her tangled, muddy hair transformed into a cascade of ebony silk, flowing down her back and shoulders. Tiny, glowing beads, like captured stars, wove themselves into her hair, twinkling with every movement. Even her poor, wounded feet were now adorned with beautiful sandals, crafted from ancient wood and engraved with symbols of power and beauty. Maluwa gasped, tears of awe streaming down her cheeks. She hardly recognized herself. She looked like the queen she had only dared to imagine. "But listen well," the old woman said, her voice turning serious. "You must leave the festival before the last drum beat at midnight. If you stay even a moment longer, all this will vanish like smoke." Maluwa nodded eagerly, her heart pounding with excitement and hope. She would not waste this gift. She would not fail. As the old woman's figure slowly faded into the night, Maluwa knew deep inside that her life was about to change forever. The heavy gates of fate, shut for so long, had finally swung open, and she was ready to step through. As Maluwa stepped through the grand gates of the Festival of the Rising Sun, it was as if time itself froze. The crowds, buzzing with excitement just a moment before, fell into a stunned silence. Every single head turned to look at her, their mouths slightly open in awe. Whispers filled the air like fluttering butterflies, carried from ear to ear. "Who is she?" someone gasped. "She looks like the spirit of the moon," another breathed. "Surely, she must be a princess from a land beyond the mountains," said an old man, clutching his chest. The lights from the festival fires bathed her in a soft golden glow, making her seem almost unreal. Her gown shimmered as she walked, each step releasing a glimmer of light that danced around her like fireflies. Her hair, beaded with what looked like tiny stars, flowed behind her with every graceful move. It was as if the heavens themselves had dressed her. At the very front of the festival, seated on a throne of carved ivory and gold, sat King Zuberi, a man known across kingdoms for his wisdom and strength. But tonight, the mighty king felt something he hadn't felt in years. His heart trembled. He rose from his seat, unable to tear his eyes away from the mysterious girl who seemed to carry the whole night sky with her. The music of the palace musicians stumbled to a stop as even they forgot their instruments, their eyes fixed on Maluwa. Servants carrying trays of golden fruits and spiced wines paused mid-step, forgetting their duties. The entire festival seemed to hold its breath, and among the crowd stood Inira, cloaked in expensive silk, her body stiff with jealousy. She had thought herself the jewel of the village, but next to Maluwa, she seemed nothing more than a dull stone. Maluwa, feeling the heavy gaze of the crowd, didn't falter. She danced. Oh, how she danced! Her movements were like poetry, calling down stars from the sky with every twirl, every step. She looked like a dream come alive, a prayer answered. King Zuberi, heart pounding like the festival drums, stepped forward through the crowd. He reached out his hand to Maluwa, his voice full of wonder. "Who are you, beautiful one?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. Maluwa opened her mouth to answer, but remembered Kanyira's warning. Speak no words. Leave before the last drum beat. So, instead, she smiled, a soft, secret smile, and curtsied low like a true princess. Then, in the distance, the drums began to sound, slow, heavy beats signaling the approach of midnight. Maluwa's heart raced. She could not stay. She could not risk it. Without a word, she turned and fled into the night, her golden dress catching the moonlight, trailing behind her like a river of fire. The stunned crowd parted before her as she ran, leaving behind gasps, wide eyes, and a king whose heart was already lost to the girl who disappeared like a shooting star. As Maluwa fled into the night, her golden dress flashing like fire under the moonlight, she didn't notice something slipping from her wrist. It was a small, delicate bracelet, old but precious, lovingly woven by her mother's own hands long ago. The bracelet, filled with tiny coloured beads and a faded charm shaped like a bird, tumbled to the ground and came to rest right near King Zuberi's feet. The king bent down and picked it up carefully, as if it were the most fragile treasure in the world. His heart pounded hard against his chest. He turned the bracelet over in his hands, feeling the warmth that still clung to it. It was simple, humble, but it carried a power stronger than any crown or sword. It was a piece of her, the mysterious girl who had stolen the breath of everyone at the festival. "This," King Zuberi whispered under his breath, his voice thick with emotion, "this will lead me to her." The crowd was still buzzing, people spinning around, trying to understand where the beautiful girl had vanished. But King Zuberi stood still, his eyes locked on the little bracelet, a quiet fire burning in his heart. He made a vow right there. He would not rest until he found her. Meanwhile, Maluwa ran as fast as her legs could carry her through the darkened fields, the cool air stinging her cheeks. She could hear the drums behind her, beating slower and slower, until the final echo rolled across the valley. The magic had reached its limit. Just as she stumbled back into the familiar mud of the pigsty, she felt the spell begin to fade. The beautiful golden gown melted away into the ragged old cloth she had stitched together. Her glossy, star-beaded hair tangled back into messy knots. Her sparkling sandals disappeared, leaving her bare, cracked feet once again touching the cold earth. Maluwa sank down beside the pigs, breathing hard, her body tired, her heart racing. To anyone who looked, she was just the poor, dirty pig girl again. But inside her, something had changed forever. Her heart was no longer weighed down by sadness. It burned now, bright, fierce, and full of hope. Though her hands were empty and her dress was in tatters, Maluwa hugged herself tightly and closed her eyes. She had danced among kings. She had felt the wonder of 1,000 eyes admiring her. She had touched a piece of her dream, and no one, not Bashira, not Inira, not anyone, could ever take that away from her. At sunrise, the sound of hooves thundered across the kingdom. King Zuberi's royal knights, dressed in shining armor and carrying the king's royal seal, rode from village to village with one mission: to find the girl who had stolen the king's heart. At every marketplace, every farm, every gathering, the knights called out the king's command: "The one who wore the woven bracelet shall be queen. Present your wrists." Girls from every corner of the kingdom rushed forward, eyes sparkling with dreams of crowns and silk. They shoved and pushed, each one desperate to be the chosen one. They stretched out their hands eagerly, flashing their finest bracelets, hoping one might fool the knights. But none matched the simple beauty of the real one, the bracelet made of love and humble threads. When the news reached Bashira's ears in Mudora, her greedy heart leapt with evil excitement. She grabbed Inira and pulled her aside, whispering her wicked plan. "You must fit into the bracelet," she hissed. "If you can force it on your wrist, you will marry the king, and we will live like queens." Inira, full of pride and desperation, agreed without a second thought. Bashira fetched oils and soaps, rubbing Inira's wrist raw to make it smaller. They tried stretching the bracelet, soaking it, even breaking it a little without making it too obvious. Inira practiced smiling sweetly, bowing low, pretending to be as kind and gentle as the mystery girl. All day long, Bashira drilled her on what to say when the knights arrived. "You must cry," Bashira ordered. "Tell them your mother made the bracelet with her dying breath." Inira laughed coldly. "I will fool them all." But behind the walls of the pigsty, Maluwa watched quietly, holding her heart in her hands. She knew the truth. The bracelet was hers. It was a piece of her mother's love, a piece of her soul. She had no fine silks, no perfumes, no lies, only the truth and her dream. And deep down, even though her heart trembled, Maluwa knew something that Bashira and Inira did not. What is made by lies can never wear the crown of truth. The sun was high when the royal knights finally thundered into Medora, their banners waving proudly. The whole village gathered, buzzing with excitement and greed. Mothers pushed their daughters forward, girls tugged at each other's dresses, all desperate for a shot at becoming queen. In the middle of the crowd, Inira stood proudly, wrapped in her finest silks and shining jewelry. Her smile was wide, confident, and dripping with arrogance. When the captain of the knights called for the girls to step forward, Inira was the first to rush out. She lifted her hands high, her wrists jingling with gold bangles. Bashira stood nearby, wringing her hands, watching closely. Inira tried to force the bracelet on, twisting and squeezing her hand. But no matter what she did, it wouldn't fit. She yanked and pulled, but the bracelet refused her. "It must have shrunk," Bashira shrieked, pushing forward angrily. "It was the cold night. The bracelet is smaller now." The captain's face remained still, his voice calm and sure. "No," he said firmly. "This bracelet was woven by the hands of true innocence. It will only fit the one whose heart is pure." The villagers began to murmur. Some even snickered behind their hands as Inira's face turned red with rage and embarrassment. Bashira tried to argue more, but the captain silenced her with a single look. Then, from the back of the crowd, someone pointed to the pigsty. "What about her?" they whispered. The villagers turned and gasped. There, covered in mud and wearing torn rags, was Maluwa. Her hair was tangled, her hands were rough, but there was a light in her eyes, a soft, steady glow of hope that could not be hidden by dirt or pain. The knights called her forward. Bashira tried to protest, but the villagers pushed Maluwa gently toward the front. She stepped forward slowly, her head bowed, her heart pounding so loudly she could hear it in her ears. When Maluwa slipped her small wrist into the bracelet, something magical happened. The woven threads slid perfectly around her skin, as if they were made for her, because they were. A soft light, like the glow of 1,000 fireflies, seemed to dance around her. The crowd gasped. Even the pigs in the sty behind her gave excited snorts, almost as if celebrating with her. The knights fell to one knee and bowed their heads. "This is she," they said with reverence, "the true maiden." The villagers hung their heads in shame, their faces burning with guilt for the way they had mocked and mistreated Maluwa all her life. Mothers who once laughed at her wept openly. Fathers who ignored her could not meet her eyes. And Bashira, Inira, they stood frozen, faces twisted with horror and disbelief. They had clothed themselves in riches and pride, but in the end, it was Maluwa, the forgotten girl in the mud, who wore the crown of destiny. Maluwa's life had changed in the most unexpected way. No longer was she the girl who sloshed through the pigsty, scraping by with barely a meal or a kind word. Now, she walked through the grand halls of the royal palace in Umara, her footsteps echoing on the polished marble floors. She was no longer the laughing stock of Medora. She was the one who had captured the attention of King Zuberi himself. The day of her coronation was nothing short of magical. Under the soft glow of the palace lights and the blessings of the gods, Maluwa stood tall in front of the king. Her golden gown shimmered with every step, her hair flowing like a river of night. King Zuberi, a man known for his wisdom and strength, placed a delicate crown on her head, his eyes filled with admiration. The cheers of the courtiers filled the air as she was crowned the palace maiden, and in time, they all knew she would become the queen. The future was bright, and for the first time, Maluwa could see it clearly. Maluwa's new life was nothing like the one she had known. No longer did she sleep on the hard, cold ground next to pigs. Instead, she rested on silk cushions, each embroidered with sparkling diamonds. Her meals were no longer the scraps she had once eaten. Now, she dined on feasts that could feed an entire village, filled with the finest meats, fruits, and delicacies. Everything she had once dreamed of was now hers, but it was not the jewels or the riches that made her heart swell. It was the kindness that the palace had shown her, the dignity she now held, and the respect she had earned. But what of Bashira and Anira, the cruel woman and her jealous daughter, who had tormented Maluwa for so long? Their fate was not as bright. The villagers, ashamed of their treatment of Maluwa, had cast them out of Mudora. They were forced to wander from village to village, begging for scraps, just as they had once forced Maluwa to do. They had no home, no honor, no place in the world they had once ruled with cruelty. Years passed, and Maluwa's reign grew strong. As queen, she ruled with fairness, kindness, and wisdom. One day, while seated on her golden throne, Maluwa looked out the palace gates and saw two familiar figures, Bashira and Anira, dirty, disheveled, and desperate. The sight of them brought no anger, only compassion. Maluwa's heart, pure and kind as always, was filled with mercy. She ordered that food and shelter be provided to them, but with a message. It was not obligation, but kindness, that she gave. She wanted them to understand that the same fate that had once been theirs was now in their hands. They had the choice to change, to live with grace and humility, or continue down the path of bitterness and shame. For Maluwa, the lesson was clear. A heart that shines in mud will shine even brighter among kings. No matter how deep you are buried in hardship, if your heart stays pure, destiny will raise you higher than you ever dreamed. And Maluwa, once the girl who lived in the dirt, was now the woman who held the power to change lives with just a single act of kindness. Wow, what an incredible journey of transformation and strength. Maluwa's story teaches us all that no matter how hard life gets, no matter how deep we are buried in the mud, if we keep our hearts pure, fate will always find a way to raise us higher. Her courage, kindness, and resilience remind us that we are not defined by our circumstances, but by how we choose to rise above them. If Maluwa's story touched your heart, if you felt the emotions and the lessons that came with her journey, then share this video with your friends and family. Let's spread this message of hope, kindness, and the power of a pure heart. Because just like Maluwa, we all have the power to change our own fate and inspire others to do the same. If you haven't already, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories that will uplift your spirit. Your support means the world to us, and we're so grateful to have you here with us on this journey. Thank you for watching, and remember, no matter where you are, the best is yet to come.